So on the left side of the screen is Patrick, and he's playing Mono Blue Spirits. Pretty simple stock. I do see 2 of the new Curiosity combat research in his list. Trimming on, it looks like Lofty Denial, and Spell Pierce, like the other just supplemental counter spells, to make room for that. And also, usually wouldn't talk about sideboard right now, but he's playing against Donovan on mono red, and he has the full 4 Cerulean Drakes to bring in.
Oh yeah, he is prepared. Donovan, on the other hand, he has Obosh as companion, and he's playing mono red with a white splash off of 4 Sacred Foundry, 4 Battlefield Forge, 4 Inspiring Vantage to give him access to Chain to the Rocks in the post-war games, which I really like from the red deck. Currently, there's not that many great red removal spells that line up to kill all of the big creatures, because now you have to also kill Sheoldred and you have to kill all the green creatures still. So splashing white to get access to Chain to the Rocks seems to fix that problem in a way that I really like. And Wear Tear is also a card that I think I like better than a Braid for mapping your board once you've put the white mana in your deck. So I'm really excited to see how that lines up here. Obviously, the boogeyman is going to be the 3 Goblin Chain Whirlers and what they're going to look like in the main deck. We'll see if we get some Chain Whirler scam games or if we get some real games. Obviously, mono blue decks creatures are quite fragile, and we'll see how it works out. So.
Yeah, so the mono blue creatures being fragile, and then also just like, I think it's been a while since I've seen a Goblin Chain Whirler in the main deck.
Well, you see, that's because I haven't been playing Pioneer recently. As you know, I love Goblin Chain Whirler so much, I play it in my mono black deck too. So honestly, the card's like really good. It helps you clean up the elves against the green deck, so you don't have to trade off every single elf throughout the game if you don't want to. It's really good against the other aggressive decks for making your attacks good. The body lines up well once it's in play. It just does a lot. And then, Lord forbid you have it when you also have a Soulscar Mage. Your opponents are miserable. So Absolutely. We're seeing Patrick seems the one that I roll. He went to turn 1 and Spectral Sailor after Donovan has led on a Monastery Swiftspear, and we're going to see if we can see that obsession get down. And looks like there's a Lofty Denial in hand, so this is looking like a really good start for Patrick. Pat at 19 and putting Donovan down to 18 and drawing his card. If that is in fact a Lofty Denial, we're going to need to see 2 1-mana removal spells to get that Selfless Spirit off the board, which I don't think is going to be easy to muster. We've got 2 Wild Slash, 3 Skewer the Critics, and some Play with Fires.
It's Pat needs to have a Geistlight Snare, right? Because Lofty Denial always costs 2 mana.
You're correct. My apologies.
I
wish I knew how all these cards. my mono blue opponents just show them to me, and then I pick my cards up and concede. Got it. And then I show them Skylasher, and then they pick their cards up and concede. So
got it. Okay. And that's why you played Legacy.
That's true. So we're gonna see what the Play with Fire targeting upstairs. I'm confused. That is going upstairs. All right, Pat Casey down to 17. I assume that means we have a Skewer the Critics to follow up with Spectacle to kill.
Possibly. I definitely see the light up the stage.
Yeah, that or we're just racing. It could be that, we're racing.
And there's the Geistlight Snare.
There's the snare for that, but the Swiftspear is still getting in for 3, putting Pat down to 14. Not my preferred plan with the red deck, although we are a little light on interaction in this build in game 1. We just have the 4 Play with Fires, 3 Skewers, and 2 Slashes, as well as 4 Bone Crusher. So it's possible that you want to try to do this. I mean, I probably would have preferred to have played creatures this turn over doing this. I don't know exactly what's in Donovan's hand that this is the line we're taking. Obviously, if we had attempted to play with Fire, the Sailor would have still gotten Geistlight Snared. But
right.
Pat in for another 2, putting Donovan down to 16, drawing yet another card. And looks like another Geistlight Snare in hand, a Mausoleum Wanderer, another Spectral Sailor, and a Shackle Geist. I can't see the 5th card. We're going to see the Shackle Geist come down. And this makes sense from Pat. He has the Geistlight Snare, so he still has his counterspell up. He gets a Shackle Geist down so he can start blocking, because again, probably one of the only ways Pat can lose here is if he starts losing the race, because Donovan's pretty committed to trying to kill Patrick with the line he's taking.
True.
And another spot where Sacred Foundry off as the land return is going to hurt. That 2 life normally wouldn't matter that much against the blue deck, but if you're committing to racing, it matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and just to speak on the red decks a little bit, they did get a new tool from the last set in Phoenix Trick, and we see kind of a split of red decks in this format where there is either I would like to fit as many creatures in as I possibly can, and then I'm playing Embercleave.
All of the bad 1-drops. I've seen Rakdos Cackler. I've seen Satyr, Fire Drinker Satyr. And I've played all these cards before. Just don't get me wrong. Zergo's coming back. Or we're back. We're still on this normal prowess shell, and we're replacing some of our 1-drops with the chick.
Yep.
And there's a Geistlight Snare. And we're gonna respond, and we're gonna stomp the Spectral Sailor. Oof.
And all of these things, an extra 1-drop with the spectacle cards there, and the 1-drops. Well, Embercleave and Burning Tree Emissary mean that you can't play Obosh, but these 3 drops with the 1-drops do facilitate this very powerful companion a lot better than any of the builds have in the past.
That's for sure. That's all happening after the Swiftspear was not blocked in combat. Donovan trying to get another card out, but trying to see if the Shackle Dice would block. Petrick declining to block, which probably makes sense. But taking 3 down to 11. And this is the hard part now for the blue deck. You've lost your obsession, so you're not strictly going to be ahead on cards for the whole game. And now you have to build a board that's going to win against the red deck. You're behind on life. You're technically ahead on the board. All those Bone Crushers are really hard to block when it's going to come down next turn, potentially. Pat's deciding he's going to commit to the race. He's going in for 2. If we're not blocking with the Shackle Dice, we might as well attack with it, I think. It's the logic. There's a Mausoleum Wanderer and an Ascendant Spirit. And the upside here is we get to grow our Ascendant Spirit. Probably would have actually wanted to do that on my turn, because now it's potentially going to die to a shock in response. But we also get to tap down the Swiftspear with our Shackle Geist ability, or the Bone Crusher, whichever one we prefer. Probably the Swiftspear this turn. So Bone Crusher coming in. It's probably going to resolve.
Yeah, I think Donovan might have just decided that Swiftspear is not coming in because he didn't have the spell to interact when Pat would have made it a 2/3. So just wanted to keep his card.
He's going to tap the Bone Crusher Giant. Interesting. And level up the Ascendant Spirit we talked about. Threatening 5 on the crackback here. Donovan at 7. Lofty Denial is a pretty good draw. When it's stuck on 3 lands, and you have plenty of mana to cast it. So now it's about how many creatures do you attack with. Obviously, again, the only way you're going to lose here is if your opponent just goes 3 1-drops and you can't counter them all because you have your denial. So how much pressure should you apply? I think I like attacking with just the Ascendant Spirit.
Okay. And
then using my extra mana to deploy the Spectral Sailor that's in my hand still, and either level or cast a Lofty Denial, depending on which one's needed, and then tap the Bone Crusher again in combat, allowing the Swiftspear to come in. I think it's the right approach. If you don't have to use the denial and you get to level your spirit again, you're threatening to swing for lethal next turn in the air with that line. But the other line is to attack with also the Shackle Geist, and then use the Spectral Sailor as a surprise to come down and tap the Bone Crusher.
Right. I think this is a very similar line to the one you were talking about. It's just that Pat realizes that he can also attack with Shackle Geist and still activate its ability.
This line means that the Swiftspear will deal damage to you,
yes,
versus the other line where you potentially could throw one of your spirits away to not take the damage from the Swiftspear. But that's looking like he's in a pretty good spot here. See another Swiftspear for Donovan. She's going to resolve more than likely. I can't imagine this is worth casting a Lofty Denial over, especially because the denial costs you leveling up your Ascendant Spirit. So true. And in combat, we're going to see Spectral Sailor come down. It's going to level the Mausoleum Wanderer, and then we're going to tap down the Bone Crusher. If Donovan had double Play with Fire, Pat would take 2, counter the other Play with Fire, and then take 6 in combat and go to 3. And then he would not be able to kill him on the crackback, because Donovan's at 8.
I see a skewer in Donovan's hand.
Yeah, that's not the spell you want when you're already in combat. The upside is post-combat, you can try to kill the Ascendant Spirit, but I think that's just not going to work out. 1 Swift Spear coming in. Okay. That's going to go to 10. And we're going to see a slight at the stage. I think this will just get denied because I think this is one of the ways you can lose is that we get into 2 more spells.
Yep.
And then where Skewer can resolve. So now you can Skewer the Ascendant Spirit, which is the nice thing about the sequencing.
True.
Unfortunately, it's only going to end up killing the Mausoleum Wanderer if Patrick does, in fact, remember to sacrifice it, which he does.
Mm-hmm.
He's got 5 on board counted. He needs 3 more damage to win. So I think Obsession off the top is lethal. Or a Lord.
Well, isn't how much damage did you say he needed?
He has 5 on the board. He needs 3. So he can level plus Obsession, or he can play a Lord.
Got it. I see.
Alternatively, he can just attack with the Ascendant Spirit again, keep the Bone Crusher tapped. He's still only at 10, and Donovan's out of cards.
Yep.
So,
and depending on what that card is, it could also be correct to just level the Spirit and attack with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
we also just draw a card with our Spectral Sailor, hold the mana up too. Like there's a lot of options here, and either way, I think you're in a good spot because the red deck's finally out of cards. Attacks with just Shacklegeist. That way, the Ascendant Spirit can block one of the Swift Spears. So 2 more, Donovan down to 6. Takes a draw step. I do believe Pat has an island in his hand.
So at that point, we're probably seeing a Shacklegeist activate on the Bone Crusher.
Mm-hmm. I don't see why you would pick something other than Bone Crusher.
Mm-hmm. And then Ascendant Spirit will probably become a 4/4 at the end of turn with flying.
That would make sense to me too.
Mm-hmm.
So here come the 2 Swift Spears. I think the only card that Donovan can have to win from here is Stage. Spectacle post-combat. He has a Soul Scar Mage.
Level 2.
Level 2 on the Spirit. And that's going to be lethal on the attack. So Donovan's going to pick his cards up, and we're going to go to game 2. Very interesting game. I thought when the original Spectral Sailor got killed and this Obsession fell off, the game was going to get a little closer, but Pat's draw steps ran up really well, ended up with a larger creature and was able to keep the Bone Crusher in check with the Shacklegeist doing a lot of work that game.
And Donovan never saw Chain Whirler. Not that I think it would have mattered. I think the turns where Donovan could have
casted it would have been countered.
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly. Yep, wouldn't have resolved, and Pat just would have kept coming in.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because it's interesting because if the Shacklegeist was any other creature, I actually think that Pat would have lost the race when he was forced to attack with his other creatures. But because he had Shacklegeist, he was able to trade tapping down the Bone Crusher for some of his own damage and draw the game out in such a way that it ended favorably for him. So, but overall, let's talk about sideboarding. Let's talk about Donovan's sideboard first.
Sure.
He's got 4 copies of Chain to the Rocks, 2 Kari Zev's Expertise, the Obosh, of course, 3 Rampaging Ferocidon, 3 Rending Volley, and 2 Wear Tear. Obviously, Rending Volley seems insanely good here.
Absolutely.
I'm probably also going to bring in Chain to the Rocks because this matchup is going to be so much about keeping my opponent's creatures off the board. Past that, I don't think you want Wear Tear for Obsession because I think it's a little too fragile.
I'd agree.
I think Ferocidon is the spots where Ferocidon is going to be good. You're already going to be out on the board, so you probably don't need it. And Expertise seems probably a little too spicy for this matchup. It's probably not the matchup you wanted.
Yeah, looking to take a little bit of a larger creature than a Spirit Lord.
Yeah, so probably just those 7 in the 3 volleys and the 4 chains, probably taking out some combination of cards that don't interact favorably. So
probably Chandra Dress to Kill.
Yeah,
Wouldn't really want my deck anymore.
And then either Light at the Stage or Kamano, Pathesis Khan. Maybe Phoenix Check isn't that good.
That's where I was at. It can't block and just doesn't attack well into any spirit.
Any of the spirits other than the literal 1/1s.
Right.
So that's probably where I would be. I'd probably take the Phoenix Checks and the Chandra's out, but we'll see what he ends up doing. Obviously, like the rest of your creatures are really good, and you don't want to take out any of your damage spells because your plan is to just trade all of your spells for all of Pat's creatures.
Exactly. And then on Pat's side, we have the 4 Cerulean Drake that we discussed earlier, and then also 3 Aether Gusts that I would think come in. Just Pat sometimes needs a little bit of time, make sure the Chain Whirler doesn't resolve, the removal spell doesn't resolve for 1 turn, so that he can continue his attacking with his spirits. What do you think about something like Witness Protection or Brazen Borrower?
I think that those are probably not exactly where I want to be. The like Borrowers is really fragile still in this matchup, and it's like really important in this matchup that it's not fragile. The bounce mode is not that impactful because of Donovan's curve is so low. Witness Protection technically downgrades most of Donovan's creatures, but I don't think you want to spend a mana on a card doing that when it's more important for you to be putting things onto the board and protecting them. The one I could see you see a guard approaching coming in, which is a card from AFR. It's a choose one. The modes are you can tap one of your opponent's creatures, or you can give one of your creatures hexproof until end of turn.
Okay.
As a way to, again, potentially gain some life in some spots where you're tapping down an attacker, but it's just another way to protect your creatures from removal spells. That's possibly an option to go along with the slip out the back setter in the main deck.
Is that 1 mana?
Yes, 1 blue.
Nice.
As a staple of a friend of ours, Mark Kinney. Wanted to play it in a lot of decks. Although I assume now it's actually good in the blue-black deck you wanted to play it in because you have Ledger Shredder. So just like 1 mana protect my creature is like fine. But at the time that Shredder had not been printed yet, so it was a bit more suspicious, shall we say. Yeah, I would imagine that we're just going to see Cerulean Drake and Aether Gust, and then possibly that you see a guard approach come in, and likely takeouts are
maybe the Singleton counter spells, but I kind of like Spell Pierce in the matchup.
Possibly Denial is just worse than Gust because it's all about like buying yourself the time, and Gust is always going to do its thing for 2 mana versus Denial sometimes won't.
Maybe Patrick does have 6 copies of like the Curiosity effect in his deck, so could be trimming on some extra combat researches as to not get 2 for 1, especially on the draw. It can just be kind of hard to resolve.
I will say that like landing an Obsession on a creature is one of the cleanest ways to win this matchup because it lets you stay ahead on cards, so then you can just take any 1 for 1 that's you see. I do think that combat research is worse. One of the reasons Obsession is so good here is that it protects your creatures by bumping them out of the damage range of some of the removal spells. So like your 1/1 not dying to a Chain Whirler now is like actually pretty impactful, or like not dying to a Shock because now you also have a Lord in play. On the flip side, though, Donovan is going to be bringing in Chain to the Rocks, which Pat might surmise from the white sources in game 1 seeing no white cards. So I would think that that's probably more of what you want to be doing, and you want to try to set up a board where you're just like ending up with a Lord and a bunch of spirits and taking everything in the Shacklegeist. So. But we'll see how the game play out. It looks like they're getting ready to play game 2. Patched hand. I'm like double Cerulean Drake. Oof.
Yeah,
that's going to be tough. So Kamana Phasers because Khan. Both players giving 7. One of the sagas that some people were surprised. I think people knew Fable was going to be like playable. They didn't maybe not how good it was, but they're like, okay, this is fine. Yeah, like that's a card that surprised me a little bit. I will say the thing that it does that I like the most, which is not the most relevant in this part of the format, but it prevents you from having to play some of or as many of the exile-based damage removal spells in your sideboard by giving you ways to kill Arclight Phoenix with the backside in play to make sure they get exiled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that really stuck out to me when I played it was like, obviously that rider is very impactful across a lot of the format, but then also just how much of the removal in the format is based on 2 damage, how many of my cards have 2 toughness, and then they have an extra counter after my Kumano. So
unfortunately we forewent getting our 1/1 counter from Kumano to resolve our stomp on the Ascendant Spirit, and Pat falls off with Cerulean Drake. Blue saying stomp this. Do you think he'll block this turn?
I think so. I would block.
Yeah, I mean, your opponent could have Skullcrack. He could be a gamer. He's in the tank. He's trying to decide, should I block? Is there a reason to not block? So if you don't block, you go to 18, obviously. If you do block, and your opponent has Skullcrack, you can counter the Skullcrack anyway. So I probably would just block.
Yeah.
And if they have Skullcrack or like another Stomp, they're gonna get you.
Yep.
Yeah, like they're gonna get you.
As well, like this is just what I put it in my deck to do. I put it in my deck to block. I don't even know if I really put it in my deck to attack that much. Like like
and occasionally it'll counter a spell, but like here,
right.
even if Donovan has Stomp, you still counter the Stomp, you still take a 0 in combat.
Yep.
And Stomp is presumably going to kill your Cerulean Drake at some point.
Yep.
Although the upside to Cerulean Drake this way is if you have an obsession, you can land obsession on Drake, and that is very difficult for the red deck to answer. Normally.
Okay.
Of course, 4 copies to Chain of the Rocks. I have something to say about that later. True. Donovan did miss his land drop. It does play a Swift Spear post combat after getting in for 2. Second Cerulean Drake on the table, and Pat's gonna pass the turn.
And like I said, the card's not really in here to attack. He didn't attack with it in that turn there, and so I would have been blocking with it, especially with the second one.
The adage that I learned a long time ago is, and this is going to be even like more like it's going to be the same because you're going to counter this one, and one of your guys is going to live, and maybe you have an actual counter spell for the thing. You have a nice slip one of them out, and then you'll sack the other one. I assume is the correct thing to do here. Yep.
I don't think it got sacrificed. I think damage was moved to, because that Bone Crusher Giant is still in the adventure zone.
Yeah. Okay. So Pat's gonna take two. Unless Donovan targeted himself with it, so not let the Cerulean Drake counter it. That would be the like big brain move.
I hear that.
Presumably the reason to not block last turn. That would be galaxy brain playing. So I would like to see if I can clarify what the life totals actually are after that sequence happened. Pat's attacking for 2, presumably putting Donovan to 16. And the Stomp resolving, putting Pat at 16. Third Cerulean Drake.
We do have clarification that life totals are 15 to 18.
15 to 18. Okay. That is those are life totals. I'm very confused.
Now 16. Okay.
Okay. So 15 and then Donovan is at 16. Got it. Okay. Cool. So we're gonna tag again. Presumably we're gonna block with Cerulean Drake. Okay. Pat's electing to take an extra damage in case Donovan had 2 instants. Okay. That's going to 13. And then Soulscar Mage. There's the Chain Whirler. Unfortunately, Soulscar does not prevent the prevention of the damage from Cerulean Drake and allowing the Chain Whirler to put minus count. It's not that good. Yeah.
But Donovan is still missing land drops and cannot cast a Goblin Chain Whirler.
I guess he could have stomped his Swift Spear. But then I would still block and just trade the Swift Spear off. Right? Because then the Swift Spear will be a 2/3 with 2 damage on it. I have to ask them after this game what got targeted, because I have no clue.
Yep.
Faithless Haven in play for Pat here, helping with the flood a little bit. It's going to be a little gum up the ground. Although I would probably just be attacking with it because it's hard for my opponent to remove it on my turn and then use my Cerulean Drakes to block. Especially now that one of them's 2 toughness and is going to presumably be able to kill the Kamana next turn. Flex to pass, using no attacks.
So we hyped up these Cerulean Drakes, but they're not backed up by any of the other spirits that Patrick has put in his deck or anything like that.
When you keep 4 lands, double Cerulean Drake, and then draw lands and more Cerulean Drakes, it's hard to have your spirits game plan really come together. Granted, I don't think he's in a bad spot here because Donovan's attacks are, if he doesn't have another Stomp, or is it willing to try to represent having another stop? He doesn't have good attacks. He's still missing his third land drop. And, you know, if he had a chain roller so he could threaten to make a good attack into the Drakes, like, he can't because he double lock, but like we'd have something. But it looks like he's going to represent another stomp. And we're going to see this Faceless Haven get animated, and we're going to see some blocks happen. So it looks like a trade for the Cerulean Drake, an attempt, well, eating with the Cerulean Drake, eating with the Faceless Haven, and then jumping the Swift Spear. Oh, not really a jump because protection from red.
Right.
Strong. Although we're going to see a play with fire on the Faceless Haven. And we'll see if Pat will elect to sacrifice one of his Cerulean Drakes to counter this.
Because if this resolves, it would make the Faceless Haven a 2/1. Prowess has been triggered.
Oh, we're going to see a Rattle Chains in response, attempting to give the Faceless Haven Hexproof until end of turn. That's probably going to be pretty good.
What do we got, Donovan?
A Rending Volley on the Rattle Chains, which cannot be countered by Cerulean Drake because it cannot be countered. And then the Rattle Chains ability will resolve. And then they're going to trade in combat because the Soulstar gets up to 3/4. And then Kamano will die. And the Faceless Haven and the Rattle Chain should be in exile. Although I don't think it's going to matter for the game.
I agree.
Actually, the Rattle Chain, my apologies. The Rattle Chains actually should be in the graveyard because it didn't actually take damage this turn. Because the damage just got replaced with minus counters from the Soulscar Mage.
Wow.
Anyway, so Pat takes 0. He's going to crack back for 3, putting Donovan down to 13. Very fast. You have to read all the red cards very carefully to know which one of them still exile something when you have a Soulscar in play. True. Because they're all worded slightly differently. It's almost like on Moto, any of the like prevention effects. And like redirecting damage. They're all worded slightly differently. So depending on which one you're casting, you have to actually know to figure out what you're choosing as a source and what you're targeting. And I've seen many clips of someone casting a harm's way, saving their opponent's creature, killing one of their own creatures. It's very funny. Bone Crusher comes down after the third land, in for 1 with a Swift Spear, putting Pat down to 12. End step, he's going to flash in the Spectral Sailor and draw a card. I think if the Sailor goes unanswered, Pat should be in a pretty good spot because the Drakes are going to prevent him from taking damage here. Be a really good time to resolve this Goblin Chain Roller, eh? Looks like Pat does have a Geistlight Snare in his hand, though. Unless it's a Mausoleum Wanderer, because those cards look the same to me.
Lots of blues and purples and swirlings.
Pat in for 4, putting Donovan to 9. It is, in fact, a Mausoleum Wanderer and a Shacklegeist. Is it time? Is it time to unleash the chain? Because once you get going, Cameron, you can't stop. That's the trick, you know? And I don't think it's getting better. I think we're gonna see it come down here, and it's gonna be pretty good. As a fun fact about Chain Roller, it does not target your opponent. And as a result, will not be able to be countered by Cerulean Drake. And Shacklegeist gets to live, and Pat goes to 12.
And the Soulscar Mage is dead, so we're not
putting any counters anywhere. No attacks with the Swift Spear again. Oh no, here it goes. There's the Swift Spear, in for 1 more. Put Pat down to 11. And oh, I missed a shock on the Sacred Foundry. Oh, my apologies. Donovan's actually at 7. My apologies. Pat's going down to 10.
Seems like Pat drew a Curious Obsession and was figuring out what to target with it. Chose Shacklegeist and then is using that as his only attacker.
Yeah, it does need to pay for that obsession for mana.
True.
There it is. But in for 2, putting Donovan down to 5, getting his card back. That's probably going to be pretty hard to come back. I think Donovan needs to have like double removal spell to force the Drakes to get sacrificed to have good attacks this turn. Killing the Shacklegeist. Another Shacklegeist. Might have been a reason to put it on the Drakes so that if you drew another Spirit, you could activate Shacklegeist if you wanted to. But I assume Pat's going to make some blocks here instead.
And I think Pat's idea was, let's put it on the one that doesn't have pro red, attack with it, and then block with my pro red creatures.
I think both are going to have the merits. So I think
Yeah.
this is going to end up working out better. Of course, if Donovan finds another stomp, that might be curtains. We'll see. Yeah. Either I missed a shock or Donovan did in fact stomp himself to get around this really injury thing. Those are the two options. Again, we'll have to talk with the players. After
Yeah.
Doing some math here. I think if you have just creatures to play, then you're probably dead because it looks like Donovan's at 4.
That tracks.
And with Donovan being at 4, Pat only needs to untap with the 2/2 Cerulean Drake and the Shacklegeist. Actually, either Cerulean Drake and a Shacklegeist. And he has lethal in the air, which means we need to see some removal spells. Second Chain Roller's not going to do it, I don't think. Unless, what if Pat doesn't block? Pat takes 8 and goes to 2, and then Chain Roller puts him to 1. So that's not lethal. So if he has like a shock, casts it, it gets countered, and then Pat doesn't block, then Chain Roller's lethal. He has a Skewer in his hand. It's like a Skewer, Chain Roller, and one other card. It's definitely a tough spot here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to puzzle it out myself. So I think if you play Chain Roller and Skewer the tap Shacklegeist, that's the best one. I think you're still dead though, because I think your opponent can just let all of that resolve and then kill you on the crackback. So he's going to Skewer for mana, targeting Pat, it looks like.
Interesting.
Pat's going to take it, go to 7, and then a second Skewer. Pat's going to go to 4. And then make all of his blocks and not die, I assume.
Yep.
See some chumping on the Chain Whirler, and then two stone walls in front of the other creatures. And that's going to do it. Pat Casey's going to win the match, going to 4-1. Tough draw from Donovan, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, getting stuck on mana with the 3 drops in his hand was tough. And also, he didn't see a single one of his. He saw one sideboard card in the first Rending Volley. Patrick obviously drew many Cerulean Drakes to lock that game up. But